Hi there, this is Shawn Spute here with September's Reigning Press newsletter podcast. So why a podcast? Well, because not everybody has the time to read, and if you follow a lot of authors, you know that you could spend all of your time reading our newsletter. So this way, you can just plug me into your ear and listen away, and you can actually drive down the road and listen at the same time. So let's go ahead and get on with it. Again, this is my September newsletter. And first thing on the agenda, of course, is going to be author news. So I promised you guys some pictures of the historical sites used in my Remnant series. And I finally got to go back into Seattle, where I grew up. So I know it pretty well. One of the historical sites in the Odyssey is actually St. James Cathedral. In the book, it's called, it's the Rhodanian stronghold called Stonegard. So I took some really cool pictures, but if you're listening to this, you're going to have to go to my Pinterest board to see them. Just to give you some spoiler alerts, they have some the whole church itself is built the shape of a cross. So you've got the four corners, but they have these incredible things like they have one altar room that has Mary, the Queen of Heaven in it that's done all in bronze. Another altar room where they have the burning bush that's done all in gold. I was up in the pipe organ loft, which is incredible to actually go behind the pipe organs, and I got to take some pictures from that view so you can see down into the sanctuary. You get to look right over the baptismal tank, which is this magnificent marble piece done in the shape of a cross. You actually get to see the center dais of the church, and from up above you can get a better view of the cross. They've also got this incredible, beautiful altar up on the raised dais that is made of marble. It's got four sides to it, of course, but each side has two panels, and those panels were done by four different artists, but they depict the same theme, which is wheat and grapes. For those who have evangelical or Christian backgrounds, you know that both of those represent Christ. Let me see some other things about it. They actually had this really cool cross, and I believe this cross came from the original church that burned down right around the turn of the century. Oh, by the way, this church, St. James, was built in the early 1900s. It burned down in 1913, and they had to rebuild it again. So it is the second church in Seattle. The first one, of course, burned in the fire in the late 1800s. So that one burned down, and this was the second church they built. So anyway, you can go to my Pinterest board and see the pictures there. If you're interested in taking a tour, you don't have to make an appointment. You just show up at St. James Cathedral on Wednesdays at 1 o'clock. The gal who does the tours is like a walking encyclopedia. She's absolutely fabulous. She gave me so much information. I had to keep it was hard for me to keep from breaking the speed limit going home because I wanted to get back and start on taking notes for like I said, for the third book in the Remnant series called The Odyssey, where we're going to spend a lot more time inside Stonegard than we have so far. Okay, so that was on author news. Next is the blog to book. As you know, for the Remnant series, I started this as a blog on my personal blogging site, sspute.com, and it just kind of evolved into a novel series. So I decided for the Remnant, I would continue to blog to book the series. So here is the next installment, which right now we are with Ennis and Clifton. Of course, Ennis she's been infected with the lycanthrope virus. She's now have become a werewolf, and she's got to figure this out. She's also got to figure out her relationship with Clifton. So let's get to it. I'm going to read an excerpt from this next chapter, but if you want to read the whole thing, you're actually going to have to go to the newsletter to read it, because it just takes too much time for me to read all of my newsletters. So here we go. This section is called Embracing Change. In front of her lay the Cascade Mountain Range. Behind, a 12 by 12 room, chains, and a man intent on keeping her as a prisoner. Ennis didn't need to think twice to know which direction she was headed. She also didn't need to look back to know who it was chasing her, his anger palatable, his will clawing at the edges of her mind, compelling her to stop, even as something deep inside struggled to obey. But Ennis didn't spend decades dealing with a cabinet that resented her governorship and a conclave that devoured any race not strong enough to stand against it without having learned a few tricks of her own. Gathering her will, she slammed it in place, blocking her sensitivity to Clifton and the compulsion to obey. Plunging beneath cedar boughs heavy with last night's snowfall, she raced into the forest, flying over ground carpeted in a multicolored tapestry of fallen pine needles and last year's leaves. Heart pounding loud enough for her eyes to feel it, she cast a desperate gaze across her surroundings, hoping to find a trail or path, anything that would help her flee the man behind her. But everywhere she looked, her flight seemed blocked by piles of dead fallen clumps of bushes whose thorns would tear right through flesh as easily as a knife. Adrenaline pumping, the fear of being caged, a fist around her chest. Innes could feel Clifton's breath on her neck, feel his hands reaching out to grab her. In one last desperate attempt to escape capture, she threw herself on the ground and rolled beneath a pile of fallen trees. With barely enough room to get through, Innes clawed her way to the other side, batting back a cry of pain as jagged pieces of tree bark bit into her naked shoulders and hip. The forest behind her echoed with the sound of Clifton's cursing. Too big to follow her under the log, he was tearing at the branches that kept her from him. Innes, now free of the tree and its flesh-biting bark, rolled to her feet and against her better judgment looked back over the pile of fallen trees and found Clifton staring back, his gaze dark, savage, wolf eyes, the eyes of a predator who's found its next meal. Like an animal whose need to escape has been arrested by the mesmerizing gaze of the one stalking it, Innes felt herself being pulled towards him, her will slowly evaporating. Without conscious thought, she found herself moving towards him. Lifting her arm, she reached out to let him pull her over the pile of wood, but jerked back as the jagged edge of a broken tree limb sliced into the back of her arm. Broken too was the hole Clifton had somehow gotten over her will. "You son of a bitch," Innes exploded, the release of her mind like being shot from a cannon. "Wasn't it enough that you ruined my life? Now you want to turn me into some kind of thrall?" With a newfound purpose for the rage eating away at her gut, Innes didn't wait for an answer, but turned and started running in what she prayed was the opposite direction of the cabin. As before, her way seemed blocked on every side until out of the corner of her eye she caught sight of a path too narrow for bear or large game, but perfect for smaller creatures, or a woman intent on evading her enemy. Giving herself no time to second-guess her decision, Innes angled her body and leapt. All right, the rest of it you guys are going to have to go to the newsletter to read. Or wait until next month when I post it up on the Raining Press news site. Okay, on to the next one. Writer's Journal. Okay, this is where I share the journey with you guys. So again, I'm going to read an excerpt. You're going to have to go to the website next month to read it, or the newsletter. So this one is called To Hell with Lemonade, I Want a Margarita. We've all heard the old adage, when life throws you lemons, make lemonade. Well, I don't know about you, but I'd rather make a margarita, thanks anyway. Every writer has moments, days, even weeks when it feels like the universe is conspiring against them. Sometimes it's because it feels like the muse has left the building with no forwarding address, or because life is throwing you the proverbial lemons and you're so tired of trying to figure out what to do with them, you end up throwing them in a blender, adding a little tequila, lime, and salt, all the while secretly hoping you won't run out until the pain is numb enough you no longer care. Like lemons, which are corrosive by nature, those uncontrollable life events and situations can eventually begin to erode our dreams, our passions, and ideas until before we know it, we're wondering if we even have what it takes to become a successful author, let alone finish that novel or short story or memoir we've been working on for God knows how long. As those who follow me know, my sister and I have just recently helped our parents downsize into a retirement community so I can move in and help care for my father, who has been diagnosed with advanced Alzheimer's. What you may not know is, within days of making that decision, my life went from one of a focused intent to feeling like a fish thrown up on the beach without any hopes of ever being able to find water again. Now, I'm generally an optimistic person and make valiant efforts not to allow myself to wallow in the pools of depression and self-doubt. At least not for longer than 5 or 10 minutes. But between caring for my parents and struggling to find time to sit down, undisturbed, while I work on the next novel in the Remnant series, I was beginning to experience serious, prolonged moments of self-doubt, especially whenever I logged onto my Facebook or Twitter account and started reading how much success my fellow writers were having. In reality, 1 or 2 success stories out of thousands isn't really all that crushing. Even so, it sure as hell felt like it at the time. But the universe does have her moments of benevolence, as she proved when I was scrolling through a backlog of emails the other day and came across Joanne Penn's from the CreativePen.com newsletter. Inside was a link to an article by an author, Stephen Pressfield, entitled Killer Scenes and Self-Doubt. Again, so that's enough of that. If you guys want to know the rest of it, you're going to have to either read the newsletter, which I give you links to Stephen's article, and to Joanne's, and to his book, Virtues of War. You can go there to get the rest of that. Don't forget that you can get the first book in the Remnant series, The Gathering. It's free for those people who sign up for the newsletter. For those who don't want the newsletter but want to read the book, they can get it at Amazon.com, Smashwords, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Life, and in iTunes. Also, first book in my Keys of Destiny series, Mark of Shamash, which is an historical novel that takes place in Mesopotamia, and that's about the gods, mythology. It deals a lot with the transition between mythology and the upcoming transition into Abraham. So actually researching Abraham was what gave me the background for the Mark of Shamash. I got caught up in the histology behind Abraham and thought, what better way to actually tell that story than to write it from a historical viewpoint, but not from Abraham's view, but from his great-grandmother, Sarah. So anyway, you can get that one at Amazon.com, Smashwords, Kobo, Life, Barnes & Noble, and iTunes. Let me see. Okay, so we're on to the next one. What am I reading? This is my book reviews. I've got 2 for this month's newsletter. First one is by Kate Cross. First book in her Clockwork Agent series is Heart of Brass. This is a steampunk, and you know how much I love steampunk. This is steampunk and Regency romance, which is a really cool combination. It's a lot like Mel Jean Brooks. If I told you guys about her Iron series, I absolutely love Mel Jean Brooks. And as far as I'm concerned, she just doesn't write enough novels. Anyway, back to Kate Cross. First time I read her work, absolutely loved it. So here's the review. So what I said was steampunk plus Regency romance plus strong female protagonist. Does reading get any better? I think not. Heart of Brass is a killer, literally. Read. It's one of those stories that hooks its readers from the very first page and keeps them hooked until the last. Arden is smart, sexy, and probably one of the most transparent heroines I've read in a long time. She's desperate to find her husband Lucas, then prove his innocence. She relies on a little too much whiskey, takes advantage of a friend who's made it obvious he'd rather do more than hold her hand, and struggles with how to forgive her husband for abandoning her when the only memories he has of her are those given him by the very people who sent him to kill her. Full of adventure, mystery, and romance, Heart of Brass and the Clockwork Agent series is definitely going on my list of must-reads. Matter of fact, I've just picked up the second novel in the series, Touch of Steel. Can't wait to read it. So what did the author say about her book? Arden, undercover for the Wardens of the Realm who protect 1898 steampunk England, has the status, wealth, and independence of a countess, and can see the final moments of a murder victim's life. Her husband, Lucas, vanishes until she spots him one night. The company wiped his memory and sent him to kill her, but he cannot. Yet if he does not, someone else will. Someone will, and they'll kill him. So that's what the author said. My next review, of course, is Terry Brooks. We all know how much I love Terry Brooks. I grew up on Tolkien, so I love fantasy. I've been a fan of Terry Brooks since his first book in 1975 was The Sword of Shannara, or as Terry pronounced it, Shannara. So this is the second book in the Defenders of the Shannara series. It's called The Darkling Child. And this is what I said about it. My all-time favorite author and novel-writing hero, Terry Brooks, has once again entertained in a truly Tolkien style of fantasy and vulnerability with his newest novel in the Defenders of Shannara series, The Darkling Child. One of my favorite things about Mr. Brooks' novel is the way he weaves the weft and warp, past and present, of his stories like a tapestry. I also appreciate the fact that you can start anywhere in the history of Shannara and feel right at home without having to go through reams of backstory, because Terry always blends just enough of Shannara history in his current work that you never feel as though you've walked into the middle of a half-told story. The Darkling Child picks up 5 years after Paxton Lay has defeated the sorcerer Arcanian. Afanglo Isendale is the current Ardrees, and he becomes her champion. By the way, Afan is dying in this novel. But as happens with all hero arch enemy stories, the sorcerer Arcanian is not dead, only in hiding. And he's found one of Paxton Leia's distant cousins, Reinforce, who is in possession of an ancient and powerful magic, the Wish Song. It's a race to see who will control Ren and the Wish Song, Arcanian and his apprentice, or Paxton and the Druids. And in the doing, who will die and who will live. As always, Mr. Books has woven just enough magic, suspense, romance, and evildoers doing bad things to good people to receive the ultimate sit down and read until I'm finished award. So this is what the author site says about the book. After taking up his enchanted sword against the dark sorcerer Arcanian, Paxton Lay has become the sworn protector of the Druid Order. Now a critical hour is at hand as the beloved High Druid nears the end of her reign and prepares to pass from the mortal world to the one beyond. There is little time for Paxton to mourn his friends and the benefactor before duty summons him. For in a distant corner of the Four Lands, the magic of the Wish Song has been detected. Paxton must accompany a Druid emissary to find its source and ensure the formidable power is not wielded by the wrong hands. But danger is already afoot in the village of Partlow. Gentle traveling minstrel Rain Forsh possesses the uncanny gift and curse of the Wish Song, and now his coveted abilities have captured the benevolent interest of none other than Arcanian, whose quest for power is exceeded only by his thirst for revenge. The lone survivor of a brutal assault on a notorious pirate city, the sorcerer is determined to retaliate against the Federation's elite military guard and use the devastating power of the Wish Song as his ultimate weapon. So you can go and find The Darkling Child and Heart of Brass on Amazon. You can also go to author websites. So you could go to katecross.com, or you can go to Terry Brooks and you can find The Darkling Child. Or, of course, you can go to Amazon to find either one of them. That's it for September. Thanks, you guys, for following me. You can always catch me on Twitter or Facebook. You can visit my blog site, my personal blog site at ssbutte.com, or go to my author website at writingpress.com. So, thank you for sharing the journey, and I'll see you guys, talk to you guys, visit with you guys in another month.